This is not the story of a suitcase. This is the story of a woman whose dreams, hopes, future, and 22 young years of life were forcibly crammed into that suitcase. This is a story that illustrates in the most painful way how justice can be delayed, how a system can decay, and how a scream can be ignored. This is the story of Ayşe Tokyaz. And this story once again slams the truth in our faces, that femicide in Turkey is not an isolated judicial matter, but the most bitter manifestation of a deep-seated social and political problem. The date is July 13th, 2025. Istanbul, a giant metropolis, is hosting the hustle, dreams, and frustrations of millions, as always. In a quieter, more secluded corner of the Eyüp Sultan district, a large black suitcase, seemingly carelessly discarded by the roadside, was about to change the course of an ordinary day forever. This suitcase, which at first glance drew no attention, and was perhaps mistaken for forgotten luggage, was in fact hiding a terrible secret, one of the most brutal murders of modern times. When that suitcase was opened, what emerged was not just a lifeless body. It was the weight of being a woman in Turkey, the vulnerability, and the arduous struggle for justice. Inside the suitcase was a bright, vibrant young woman who had come to Istanbul from Hatay with great hopes. Ayşe Tokyaz, a 22-year-old nursing student. She was in the prime of her life. On a path to heal others, she had fallen victim to the monster closest to her. Her end should not have been the darkness of a cold suitcase. Her story should not have been confined to the chilling lines of an autopsy report, but it was. And this murder left behind not only a grieving family, but also dozens of disturbing questions that demand answers. Asterisk, the focus of the investigation was the man who turned Ayşe's life into a nightmare, Semel Kok, 38 years old, a former police officer. The word former was in fact the most glaring harbinger of the impending disaster. Kok had tainted the uniform he was meant to serve justice with, committing disgraceful crimes such as bribery and abuse of office, for which he was dismissed from the police force. His record was not limited to professional misconduct. A long criminal history, including robbery, drug use, and causing death, clearly revealed his propensity for violence and his lawless character. The relationship between Ayşe and Semel Kok would be the biggest mistake of the young woman's life. The trust she placed in this man, 16 years her senior, gradually gave way to fear and a desire to escape. When Ayşe rejected Kok's marriage proposal, citing the age difference, and seeing his dark past, she was unknowingly signing her own death warrant. The moment she expressed her wish to break up, the monster within Semel Kok was fully unleashed. The killer meticulously laid out his plan. On July 9th, he lured Ayşe to his apartment in a luxury complex in Kukukmas with a lie. "Let's talk one last time. Let's settle things amicably." Ayşe Tokyaz, who walked through that door, would never leave of her own free will again. What happened within those four walls, and for how long, may forever remain a secret. But the outcome was made clear by the Forensic Medicine Institute's report. The young woman was brutally murdered by being struck repeatedly on the head with a blunt object, resulting in a fractured skull and cerebral hemorrhage. This rage directed at a defenseless body was not the product of a momentary lapse of sanity, but of a planned and ruthless execution. Semel Kok's composure after the murder further amplified the horror of the event. After taking a life, as if nothing had happened, he meticulously worked to destroy the evidence. He repeatedly cleaned the blood-soaked floorboards and used chemicals on the remaining stains. Not content with that, he had the walls of the room where the murder took place painted a deep red, as if he could conceal the atrocity he had committed with a red veil. This was not just an attempt to cover his tracks, but also a reflection of his desire to psychologically suppress the crime and erase what had happened from his memory. On the night of July 11th, 2 days after the murder, Koch took the most horrifying step. He placed Ike's lifeless body in a large suitcase. The moments captured by security cameras were seared into the memory of everyone who watched them like a dagger. The footage clearly shows Semel Koch and an accomplice calmly carrying the heavy suitcase containing the young woman's body and loading it into a vehicle. The fact that they stopped at a gas station en route to buy deodorant, spraying it on themselves and inside the car to mask any potential odor, proved once again how detailed and monstrous the plan was. Asterisk, although Semel Koch may have planned this monstrosity alone, he was not alone during and after the execution. As the investigation deepened, a criminal network emerged. The individuals Koch sought help from became accessories to this crime, whether they knew the full extent of the horror or not. The number of detainees quickly rose, and the presence of an active-duty police officer among them exposed the scale of the scandal and the decay within the system. A total of 7 people were arrested on charges of premeditated murder and aiding and abetting a crime. One of the most crucial links in this criminal network was the taxi driver Koch had arranged with to dispose of the body. The driver's testimony to the prosecutor's office summarized the planned nature of the murder and Koch's state of mind. Koch had offered the taxi driver a staggering 500,000 Turkish lira to get rid of the body and had uttered this chilling sentence: "There is a suitcase. It's destined for eternity." This statement was not just a confession, but a manifesto of his arrogance and lack of conscience, showing how little value he placed on human life. The driver recounted that Koch told him, "There's something in my car. Take it and hide it. I'll ask for it back in 15 days. But he became suspicious and frightened. These statements showed how relaxed and in control Koch was, even after committing murder. The involvement of an active-duty police officer as an accomplice caused a separate uproar. On one hand, a monster dismissed from his profession for crimes committed. On the other, an officer still in uniform helping him. This situation raised questions about how deep the protection and patronage networks run and how crime can become normalized even within the institution itself. The Ayşe Tokyaz murder is not just the atrocity of a single killer. It is the tragic result of a horrific chain of negligence, unheard screams, and ignored dangers. This murder was a preventable catastrophe, and the footsteps of this catastrophe were audible years before. First and foremost, the fact that the killer, Semel Koch, was walking free was a scandal in itself. Just days before he murdered Ayşe, on July 4, 2025, another murder case had been opened against him. The year was 2023. The place, Diyarbakır. A Turkmen woman named Ejigül Ovazova had died suspiciously after falling from the 8th floor of the apartment building where Semel Koch lived. Although the incident was initially made to look like a suicide, DNA samples found under Ovazova's fingernails scientifically proved that the person she had struggled with in her final moments was Semel Koch. Despite this overwhelming evidence, the Turkish justice system made an incomprehensible decision. Semel Koch, for whom an indictment seeking an aggravated life sentence for intentional killing of a woman had been prepared, was released on judicial control instead of being arrested. That decision was, in effect, the moment Ayşe Tokyaz's death warrant was signed. A prime suspect in the suspicious death of a woman, a man whose DNA was found under her nails, was released back onto the streets, deemed not a flight risk. The scandal did not end there. The judicial control order required Koch to report to the nearest police station once a week to sign in. However, investigations revealed that this dangerous man never once set foot in the station he was supposed to report to. In other words, a murder suspect facing an aggravated life sentence was neither detained by the judicial system nor monitored by the control mechanism. He had traveled from Diyarbakır to Istanbul, free as a bird, without any supervision, built a new life, and brutally murdered another young woman he had targeted, Ayşe. If Ayşe's death had been solved and her killer had received the punishment he deserved, Ayşe Tokyaz would be alive today. This is the story of how the system abandoned not just one, but two women to their deaths. The most painful link in this chain of negligence is the unheard scream of Ayşe and her family. The account given by Ayşe's twin sister, Ayşe Tokyaz. After the murder was a summary of the helplessness experienced by many women in Turkey. Ayşe explained that her sister had been repeatedly threatened by Semel Kok, subjected to physical violence, and held captive in his home. The family appealed to the police and the prosecutor's office multiple times, but each time they hit a wall. They were turned away with bureaucratic and insensitive responses like, "Ayşe is an adult. She is there of her own free will. There's nothing we can do, and she needs to be the one to file a complaint." Even more horrifying was Ayşe Tokyaz's claim that the statement she gave at the police station somehow ended up in the hands of the killer. If this allegation is true, it signifies not just negligence, but a betrayal where the victim was delivered to her killer by the very institution she trusted most. Recognizing the seriousness of these allegations, the Ministry of Interior announced that it had appointed a civil and a police chief inspector to investigate the matter. However, this step would not bring back a lost life. Ayşe had been abandoned by all the state mechanisms that were supposed to protect her. Her screams were not heard, her complaints were not taken seriously, and she was pushed to her death in plain sight. Asterisk, the discovery of Ayşe Tokyaz's body in a suitcase detonated like a bomb in the public conscience. This murder was the last straw. Women's rights organizations like the We Will Stop Femicide platform, the Children and Women First Association, and Ekmek v. Gal, along with bar associations, political parties, and tens of thousands of conscientious people rose up to demand justice. Protest demonstrations were held across Turkey, especially in Istanbul. Slogans like "Justice for Ayşe," "Femicide is political," and "Prosecute the killers, don't acquit them," echoed through the country's streets. This murder transcended being just a criminal case and became a symbol of the struggle for women's right to life. The fact that Semel Kok was released while on trial for another murder and a lack of oversight directed public anger towards the justice system and political authorities. The rising number of femicides and policies of impunity following Turkey's withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention were once again brought into question in the most painful way by this incident. Social media buzzed for days with the Ayşe Tokyaz hashtag. People demanded that not only the killer, but also all those responsible for the negligence that led to this murder be brought to justice. In Ayşe's hometown of Hatay, grief and anger prevailed. The Hatay Bar Association visited the family and announced that they would follow the legal process to the end and intervene in the case. The family's pain had become the pain of the entire nation. The killer's initial statement in court further fueled public anger. His absurd defense, claiming he had psychological problems, couldn't remember the events, and that Ayşe had fallen down the stairs, was nothing more than an attempt to evade responsibility for his crime. But neither her family nor the public believed these lies. The hearings began under the intense scrutiny of women's organizations and the press, accompanied by the chants of those seeking justice. This case was no longer just the Tokyaz family's case. It was the case of all women. In Turkey, Ayşe Tokyaz is no longer with us. Her dreams, her smile, her future were stolen from her by a monster. But her name, along with the names of hundreds of women we have lost to male violence, will live on forever in our struggle for justice and equality. Her story is the most painful proof of what negligence can cost, of how heavy the price is for ignoring a scream. This case is not just a trial of a single killer. It is also a court of conscience that judges those who saw insufficient evidence in the suspicious death of Ijegel Ovazova, those who released a suspect facing an aggravated life sentence onto the streets, those who failed in their duty of supervision, those who turned away pleas for help with the excuse she's an adult, those who delivered a victim's statement into the hands of her killer. In short, all those who laid every cracked stone on the path to this murder, until justice is served, until the killer and all his accomplices receive the harshest punishment, and most importantly, until the mentality and systemic failures that lead to these murders are fundamentally changed. This struggle will not end, so that Ayşe Tokyaz's story is not forgotten, so that her name does not become another statistic, so that another woman's life does not end inside a suitcase. We will not be silent. We will not forget. We will not forgive, because we cannot bear to lose one more person. Justice for Ayşe means justice for all.